Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Gabby, all the way in the back. Can you hear me? Yeah. All right. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon. My name is Heather Sanger. I'm Chief of Staff for Senator Mike Simmons. We really appreciate you joining us this evening. Thank you to all of our wonderful resource providers who've joined us today to just help make sure that everybody has information that they need, as well as promoting wellness. Big shout out to the Chicago Mosaic School, DMA Apothecary. We've got Chicago Corps with some canine love coming for everybody, and lots of just social service resources. We're going to go ahead and start the program this afternoon. We are live streaming on YouTube, so just wanted to share that with everybody. If you can all go ahead and silence your cell phones, that would be really helpful. We're going to have some words from Senator Simmons. Afterwards, we'll do as much Q&A as we can. And without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the senator.
Thanks so much, Heather. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm State Senator Mike Simmons, representing the 7th District, which includes, can I ask folks to come a little closer? It's a lot easier, I think, for you to hear me if you're closer. We also are competing with our resource providers, so, and I'm losing my voice, so if you could just come a little bit closer up front, I promise I won't bite. So I'm State Senator Mike Simmons. I represent the 7th District, which includes Uptown, Edgewater, Rogers Park, Lincoln Square, North Center, Wrigleyville, Ravenswood, and Andersonville, and Buglow Woods. And it's an honor to welcome you to our monthly town hall. You know, this has really been an important series that we've done this year, doing town hall every month. I think it's really important for you all to get to see me and our staff every month and ask any questions that you want to ask in an accessible environment like we have here today. I want to make sure to say thank you to, this is the first time we're doing this format where we have about a dozen providers that are offering everything from canine therapy to, we have tea from DMA Apothecary, which is right over here on the right. We've got, I want to name all of them. We've got DMA Apothecary, we got Canine Therapy Corps, we have Afghan, we have the Ethiopian Community Association, we have Centro Romero, we have Chicago Mosaic School, we have Southeast Asia Center, and Chinese Mutual Aid Association. All of them are right over here on the right. I encourage you to visit them during this town hall if you are needing services. If you want to get to know some of our local small businesses, we have them in the back here. And then, of course, the theme of this town hall is wellness. So I want us all to, you know, really be in that space at this town hall. If there are things you need, if things you want to talk to me about, you want to pull me aside, we're here for it. Just holler. So let's talk a little bit about the veto session. So just real quick recap, the Illinois Senate is our state legislature. The Senate is the upper chamber of our state government. I'm your voice as state senator in the legislature. And during the October veto session, we went back for 2 weeks. And during that time, the goal was to take up bills that had been vetoed by the governor. There was one such bill, but really this was a historic veto session because we actually passed some pretty monumental legislation in those 2 weeks that we were there. The legislation I think was probably most important was legislation to counter ICE. Operation Midway Blitz left our communities oversaturated by the federal government occupying our neighborhoods and picking our neighbors off the street. It was terrible to live through that. I will never forget what was done to our community. I will never, I don't know if I will ever let go of the trauma of what was done to our communities, and I think that we ought to have people be brought to trial, honestly, for what happened there. I also think that I've said publicly that I called on the federal Illinois delegation to abolish ICE. I don't think that ICE plays a useful role in our country after what we just saw here for the better part of September and October. And so I wanted to acknowledge that because we all have been through it, and it was awful. So I'm proud that we passed HB 1342, which does 4 things. This legislation gives all of us the right to sue or bring a private right of action against federal ICE agents who abduct people off the street against the Constitution. So without warrants, which we saw disproportionately, without due process, violating the 4th Amendment of the Constitution, we passed legislation. I helped us to pass legislation and spoke strongly in favor of legislation that will, I think, make our ICE agents think twice about what they do on the streets of Chicago. Secondly, legislation prohibits ICE from coming within 1,000 feet of a court in Illinois. And this is really important because, you know, my dad is an asylum seeker from Ethiopia. There are a lot of asylees in our communities who have to go to court as part of the civil judicial process to follow the law. And so it's outrageous that people that were going back and forth with courts, including some of my constituents, were abducted. And so we passed legislation now that makes it unlawful for ICE to come within 1,000 feet of a courthouse. So that's really important. Helps us to ensure that Illinois can actually follow its own laws and keep ICE away from our courts where they don't belong. Thirdly, it keeps ICE. It essentially keeps ICE out of our hospitals because it requires hospitals to come up with policies and procedures for what to do if an ICE agent comes into a hospital. Unfortunately, what we saw in September is that ICE were just coming into hospitals and hospitals were unprepared for what to do. A lot of them just got afraid, and what we saw was chaos. Elected officials being arrested, you know, medical staff being thrown to the ground, and all these other things that look like something from out of the Middle Ages. Not interested in seeing that happen again. Really proud that we passed that legislation, which will make it safer for people to get access to health care. It's a human right to have health care. We don't need thugs in our emergency rooms terrorizing people. It's not helping us have better health outcomes or more safe communities. The other thing that legislation does is it keeps ICE away from early childhood centers, which also was badly needed. We saw a daycare teacher who was arrested in North Center just 2 weeks ago on a Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. Again, just outrageous stuff that literally makes me sick to my stomach. Legislation that is now the law, or when the governor signs the bill, will be a law that they cannot come into early childhood centers. So those are a few of the highlights of the ICE legislation, which I think is the elephant in the room and something we absolutely have to stay vigilant on. You know, I am working on additional legislation for the spring session that will bring forth several more provisions to deal with ICE. First, I am introducing legislation that will keep ICE, will prohibit ICE would prohibit state troopers, the Illinois State Police, from being at protests and being at Broadview Detention Facility. I think that Broadview is a disgrace. I think that it should be taken down. It should be not exist in our state. I personally went to pick up the keys of one of my constituents who had been kidnapped, and I couldn't even get a conversation with their agents. They literally opened the door was boarded up, and they just handed us the key to take back to the family. And I thought that was a disgrace. It's a sorry situation in our country right now that that's what this has come to. And so I don't think the state troopers should play a role at Broadview Detention Center. I don't think that the state troopers should be allowed to come into protest, because what we've seen is that they've been violating protesters. What we were told is that the state police were going to be there to protect free speech. And that's not what I've seen. I don't think that's what a lot of people in our communities are seeing. I'm outraged. I'm sure that many people across our state are outraged and frankly embarrassed at what they've seen at Broadview. And I will continue to be a loud, passionate, uncompromising voice on insisting that that be brought to an end. I've not been happy with the communication around how the state troopers have been deployed to Broadview. There has been no communication with me or with the Illinois Senate as a legislative branch of government on this, and it is an outrage. And so we also have about 5 or 6 other pieces of legislation that I'm bringing forth that are intended to address ICE. And I look forward to championing that legislation and fighting with everything I have to get that legislation passed, so that people never forget what happened to our communities during Operation Midway Blitz. Moving on to slightly lighter topics. The veto session was also amazing because we passed the transit bill.
Yeah!
I want to first say thank you to those of you in the audience and folks that may be watching the live stream here who wrote to my office this year, really for the last 2 years, advocating that we pass the transit bill. It was a hard fight. It was, and there were so many times where I was worried that this was not going to get done, but I'm proud that we were able to fight the power and push really hard on this and say transit is not going to not be an option in Illinois and in Chicago. I grew up in this community using our buses and trains. I fought really hard to make sure that we continue to have access to public transit, and we are going to continue to have public transit thanks to passage of Senate Bill 2111, which I was proud to vote yes on that legislation at 4:24 a.m. 2 weeks ago during the last day of the veto session. And just for those that don't know, that legislation sets $1.5 billion to fully fund public transit, which is great. It's just something we should celebrate. It means the CTA, the Metro and the PACE are not going to be doing fare hikes and service cuts, but actually the opposite. We're going to be expanding transit services. That legislation includes legislation that I got put in that will put us on the path of having bus rapid transit in Chicago, which we're long overdue to have that level of service, including looking at Lawrence Avenue and Western Avenue as corridors where we can have faster bus service. And it's going to lead to much more frequent expanded services all across Chicago, including in several corridors in our district. You know, CTA trains that eventually will come every 10 minutes or faster, and buses that will come every 10 minutes or faster all across the city. I think that's a great thing. And we're also going to be protecting our transit workers who operate our buses and trains, making sure that they are not laid off and not getting pink slips. So as a transit champion and as a transit user and transit geek, I'm really excited about passage of that legislation and look forward to the governor signing that bill so we can really celebrate the next generation of public transit. Because we didn't just protect public transit, we're giving the next generation an even better system than the one that I grew up on. And I really feel great about that. The bill includes a lot of other provisions. You know, I could go through all of them, but I'm going to wait to the Q&A because I'm sure some of you have questions and I want to make sure that we have a little bit of dialogue. But the transit bill is huge. It also includes the Transit Ambassadors program, which I helped to get language put into legislation, which is nothing more than really friendly customer service people who will start to be on our buses and trains, whose jobs it will be to help us navigate transit. Nice, friendly people, not overtaxing the bus drivers and train operators with a lot of questions when they're just trying to operate those vehicles, but having people whose job it is to talk to customers and make them feel excited about using transit. Washington, D.C. and several cities on the East Coast have transit ambassadors. Chicago is going to now have transit ambassadors. I think that is fantastic. We also, not to get too into the weeds, but I think it's important to also point out that I fought to ensure that we phase out what's called the fare box recovery ratio, which is where our transit systems are depending on revenues that come solely from people that are riding the trains. I think public transit should be a public good, and public transit should be available for all, regardless of government budgets, mismanagement of fiscal budgets, or any other dynamics that could put us back in another fiscal cliff scenario. And that fare box recovery ratio will fully phase out over the next 5 years. And I think that's a great thing because we identified alternative and additional revenue sources that will hold up our transit systems for the next several years. Again, fixing big structural problems with transit that are going to lead to more equitable access. It's going to lead to reduction in carbon emissions. It's going to lead to more people using public transit, not just those that can't afford cars. And that's a win for our environment. That's a win for regular, everyday working people. That's a win for our small business corridors. And it's a win for transit geeks like myself. So I'm really proud of that. Moving on to the topic of housing, really proud that in the veto session I was able to get passed out of the Illinois Senate legislation that bans 11 junk fees on renters. Really important legislation because we have a housing crisis right now all across Illinois where not only are we losing affordable housing, but rents are going up in some instances by double digits, and this is becoming the norm. I think that's a 4-alarm fire for people that are not wealthy and who are not homeowners and who in places like Rogers Park, 3 out of 4 people are renting. And so they deserve a champion, they deserve people that are going to look out for them, and I'm so proud that we got that legislation passed. We are waiting on the House to concur with that legislation, but it bans fees such as calling the landlord after hours to report safety issues with your unit. Why would you charge somebody to report a safety issue in the building? It never made sense to do that. It was a usurious charge. I'm glad that we were able to outlaw that in that legislation. We also are banning fees to have pest abatement when the infestation had nothing to do with the tenant. I've seen that happen, and it's unfair, and we shouldn't do that to people. And another several fees that are going to be banned. It's going to make it a lot easier for people to actually know how much units cost before they sign a lease, because all of those fees will be disclosed up front, and banning all those fees that even a lot of our corporate landlords admit are just exploitative and meant to price gouge. We can't afford that right now in our state. So I'm proud that that legislation is moving forward. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about just a few of the other bills that we were able to move on in the veto session. We passed a really big bill known as the Clean Reliable Grid Act, otherwise known as SERJA, which allows us to bring down energy costs, electricity costs for homeowners and renters and small business owners. There's been a big increase in demand of energy in our state due to data centers and AI companies that may be creating jobs, but they're driving up the cost of energy for all of us. And so this legislation is going to help us to flatline those prices and ultimately bring them down over the next several years. This is the work that we need to do in addition to helping people to adapt renewable sources of energy, which is also going to be good for our planet, but also going to help with people's bottom lines. This is a really green district. I'm a green champion. I was really proud to see that legislation passed. It took several months to build the advocacy to get Sergio over the finish line. But I'm glad we got that done, and it just was, in the 4.5 years I've been a member of the Illinois Senate, this was the most productive veto session we have ever had. And so I'm proud to convene this town hall promptly after the veto session, give you live updates on what we were able to accomplish during the veto session. And I want to, at this time, I'll start to wrap up my formal presentation so we can move on to the Q&A. I just want to take a second to shout out our staff. Heather Sager, who opened us up, is our chief of staff in our district office. Connor Bishop is our manager of operations. And then Gabby Tolodros is our outreach director here in the back. We are all at our district office at 1040 West Bryn Mawr. That's where you can find us. That's our district office. Come see us anytime. We love when our constituents write to the office and call into the office because we take input from our community seriously and we act on the things that we hear from our constituents. I'm proud that I'm going to be filing, as of Monday, 59 bills for the spring session, and a lot of those come directly from our constituents. It's people that have come to our office with an idea, people at town hall who pull me aside and ask me about a particular policy, or people who are in crisis and who are suffering because of broken systems and policy failures. And it's time for change on that in our state. So I'm proud to be acting on these things that bubble up from our district. And I'm sure we'll have a lot more things that will come up in the Q&A. So I'm going to wrap up there and say thank you again for those here who may need a tea or a drink. We have some water in the back. We have tea in the back. But I'm looking forward to your questions, comments, and with that, we'll turn it over. So thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you for all that you've done in regards to ICE. It's a pleasure to see you again. And thank you for all the legislative work that you're doing in getting us ready for when ICE comes back again. They'll come back with more force, with more brutality, and to do illegal things to human beings. What can we do as a community to be better prepared?
Yeah, excellent question. So our constituent that just asked the question is saying, hey, ICE is probably going to come back at some point as long as Donald Trump is the president. In fact, I think they basically said that when they left here a week ago. And so this legislation is a strong start in terms of protections. Again, I've called on our members of Congress, our entire Illinois delegation, including our U.S. senators, to call for the abolition of ICE. I don't understand how you reform an agency that just unleashed the type of violence that they just unleashed into our communities. $170 billion is sitting in ICE and Customs and Border Protection. A lot of people don't know that, and the media have not talked about this. $170 billion that was moved on July 4th from healthcare, gutting Medicaid, gutting educational assistance programs, gutting the Department of Education, gutting the Department of Labor, and it is an outrage. And that is why ICE is swollen to the extent that it is now, and why you have so many agents coming in now and who are doing the dirty work of the Trump administration. So the way that we can prepare it, and that's the question, how can we prepare for the next wave of invasions from ICE, is first of all, I just want to say thank you and give a shout out to the rapid response networks that were created across our district over the last several months. Thank you. Thank you for those that are watching, for those who have the orange whistles at their side. You are doing the Lord's work. You are. And I am just so encouraged to see how many of our neighbors were out in the streets watching out for our young people going back to school, watching out for the parents, watching out for our churchgoers, watching out for people going back and forth to our small businesses. And I would encourage you to stay vigilant and just to really put structure around the rapid response networks that have come into existence, the mutual aid networks that are new. You have people in our district who are organizers now who never organized before Operation Midway Blitz. And so, that is a great legacy that our community, I think, is a testament to our community and the people that live here. I personally am raising discussions in the state Senate around how we can start to identify resources to make permanent some of these networks so that these rapid response networks and mutual aid hubs can continue and not just depend on people who are volunteers, because people have jobs, people have kids, people get sick. And these are great networks that have been put in place that should be institutionalized. So I want you to know, as your senator, I'm thinking about that. I think that's going to cost money, and I'm willing to go back and fight for those resources, and making sure that those that have created these networks can continue to operate them. Hopefully ICE won't come back, but if they do, we will be ready to protect our neighborhoods and our communities. And I damn sure as a state senator will still be out there making sure to keep my eyes on the street as a scout. Yes.
Do you know about?
Can you just? We got some added business.
I understand that the governor put into place, is it a committee or a high-level body to take in the misconduct, the ICE and Border Patrol misconduct incidents and document them? And is that?
Oh, yes. Great
is that
question.
body in place now? Are they
Yes.
accepting input, complaints of this misconduct now? Or
Yeah.
is it?
Fabulous question. So the governor created an initiative a few weeks ago that basically gives, and I'm oversimplifying this a bit, but it gives us all the ability to basically document and report ICE malfeasance and misconduct, which is like everything that we saw. I'm glad that the governor set up that agency. I look forward to getting a briefing on how it will be staffed, what the presence of that agency might look like in terms of the state government. The Senate hasn't gotten those briefings yet, but I'm encouraged at that step. I think it's the right thing to do, and we want to make sure we have some meat on the bone for that particular agency. So we have some oversight and long-term record of what has happened here. Yes.
Two-parter, if you'll be so kind.
Of course.
So, I'm no expert, of course, but I feel like we saw a lot of illegal activity by the ICE agents. And I'm wondering, just as a not very well-educated person on the topic, what's currently impeding our law enforcement from holding ICE agents accountable? I just don't have a good understanding of what that is. And then the second part of the question is, I understand and appreciate the governor's response to bring these cases to court, but as taxpayers, we're going to foot the bill for that litigation. So is there anything we can do to make the federal government pay for these taxes, pay for the cost of the litigation to make our government follow the law?
Yeah,
State of Illinois.
Yes, I love that question. I want to think on that. I don't have any immediate proposal, but I think it would be great if we didn't have to pay the legal and court costs that are associated with ICE misconduct. Part of what has been frustrating is that the federal government has what's known as the supremacy clause, which basically allows them to big brother state government, right? They're the federal government, we're state level government, and so they're able to throw a little bit more weight around on this, and it's been frustrating, but I think that means that we as state government, state legislators, and the governor have to be really clever and creative about ways that we can minimize the costs and trade-offs that have been. We didn't pick these fights came for us. We didn't ask for ICE deployments. We did not ask for the Trump administration's point of view on community safety in our neighborhoods. We know what works, we don't need the help. And I'm proud to say that, and I've said that in the state senate as well. And so I think that that's a great idea, and it's one that I want to give some thought to. And I want to sit down with our corporation counsel for the state of Illinois, our top lawyer, and kind of explore some of those questions in the weeks ahead. One other thing too, that just reminds me, for the spring session, I want to convene some field hearings to look at the impact of these ICE ratings. What was the impact on mental health? What was the impact on trauma? We have 7 and 8-year-olds walking around talking about people who are going to be kidnapped by ICE. That's a disgrace. I can't believe that even when I was a kid growing up in this community, these are not the kind of things that children are expected to reckon with. And so it's going to be a long time of I think bringing justice to our community for this. I don't think that this is just over. Even if ICE were never to come back, I think that there needs to be a reckoning on what was done here. And so that's part of the question is why are our community members, particularly those who were illegally abducted, paying legal bills, paying for expenses that otherwise they would have never had to incur? Yes.
What's the latest on these people that have disappeared? we know that ICE is not really tracking, or doesn't, their systems are not really well tracked, so we have people that just seem to be disappeared.
Yeah.
What's going on with that?
Yeah, can everybody in the back hear me okay? Okay, excellent.
It's just when people speak, just the fans are kind of loud.
Okay, okay. Okay, is there a way that we can take a mic to people when they ask a question? Do we have capacity for that?
Yeah.
Okay, that might help with some of the Q&A. So let me answer that question. Yes, I'll tell you the short version of the story. It is not a good one. So the people that have been abducted from our streets, just here in places like Rogers Park, Uptown, Pilsen, Evanston, Skokie, all across northern Illinois, are going to Broadview Detention Center. None of us has seen what is in that facility because they won't let anybody go in, including elected officials. When I went there was a boarded up building and an agent who came out who had a mask on and didn't say a word to me, and I am a sitting state senator. That is a bad omen. And what we know is that the people that are being held at Broadview, we know that the conditions there are deplorable, absolutely deplorable. Reports of people sleeping on floors, reports of unclogged toilets, reports of people not being given water. I mean, this is like global scale scandal in terms of human rights, in terms of international justice, and in terms of the justice that I would demand as a member of this community. And I'll always be talking about that until justice is done and until there's a trial for what has happened here. What happens after they leave Broadview? Well, we know that some of our constituents, in fact, most of them are being taken to about 300 miles away from here to North Lake Correctional Facility. North Lake Correctional Center is in Baldwin, Michigan, 150 miles away from the nearest Amtrak, the nearest bus station. It is in the middle of nowhere. And it is a privately owned prison. It is a privately owned prison where our neighbors are being held for months and months and months, where even the local community is organizing against the North Lake Correctional Facility because of the conditions of the prison there. And folks are just being held there with no day in court, with no legal enforcement of immigration laws, and it's a disgrace. And so the other thing about this facility, I did some research on this. This facility, North Lake Correctional Facility, is earning $600 million a year on ICE contracts. And so we have to think about this in terms of the broader human injustice that's happening here. You have people being kidnapped off the street. You have them being held in a dirty, pre-modern facility where there's zero accountability. Not even the U.S. Senator can get in there or a governor to find out what's going on. And then these neighbors are being taken to a private prison and being kept where they're not able to interact with their families. I've heard reports that some of them are not even able to make phone calls, that their family members have to come to them. And I just told you that it's not near public transit. A lot of these people, the people that were abducted, their cars were just left there on the side of the road, cars, the windows broken. I mean, it is just outrageous. It is. And I think there's going to be a long and painful reckoning on this because we're talking about private prisons, we're talking about big corporations that own these facilities. By the way, North Lake has only been operating as an immigrant detention facility since earlier this year. So this is a new Trump infrastructure project that they're doing. And I worry about the amount of money that the corporation that owns the facility is called Geo. I worry about how much money they're making. I've heard that if you look at other facilities, they own this $1.2 billion they're earning on ICE agents around the country. And so I call on our members of Congress to shine a light on that and talk about that and talk about the disgracefulness of that.
Who owns those corporations?
What's that?
Who owns those corporations?
Well, the one that I'm aware of is called Geo. I think it'd be interesting to know who are their shareholders. Are they connected to other companies? Do they have other government contracts? Because if they do, they shouldn't have them. Those contracts should be initiated. And we need a little bit more. I think more elected officials to pay attention to this and talk about it. Otherwise, I worry it's just going to continue in the shadows. You know, ICE is now operating in Charlotte, North Carolina. They've said they're on their way to New Orleans. I mean, they're going around and doing what they just did here in other parts of the country. So it's not over. It's not, and I think we have to continue to be outraged and shine a light on this. And as I just talked about, look at the broader complex around what's happening here because it's a horrible set of incentives that are in place here to maintain this horrible status, this fascist status quo that we're seeing. Yes.
Yeah, so you talked about
Yeah, actually, I'm sorry. Connor's going to bring your mic, so we want to hear your question, please.
You mentioned the bills that you worked on to try to track what ICE is doing and get some the ability to sue them or whatever. Is it just ICE or is it all federal? Because we had border control here, we had federalized National Guard here. Are we able to go after all of them for the illegal things they've done or only ICE?
Mhm. So, when you say all of them, you're talking about law enforcement officials?
Any federal law enforcement.
Yeah. I think we should be able to. I mean, the legislation that we passed in the veto session deals exclusively with ICE. But these are also sprawling agencies. You know, ICE is now a balloon oversized agency, as is Customs and Border Protection. And so I haven't seen any legislation that would deal with additional federal law enforcement, but we should explore those also. But ICE is the one that folks were most, where we saw the most wreckage. And I would say also the state troopers, unfortunately, their behavior or what they did at Brockton. All right, I saw a bunch of other hands up front. Yes.
I don't have a question in so much as I have a statement, but I wanted to come here today to publicly thank you for your support. I know I came to your office a couple of years ago and asked for your support for Clean Slate, and you, in that meeting, you said that you would commit to voting for Clean Slate to pass that legislation. And during veto session, you did exactly that. And I wanted to tell the people right here in this district that you are a man of your word, and that I appreciate you, our coalition, our Clean Slate Illinois Coalition, and the Illinois Coalition to End Permanent Punishments, Live Free Illinois, and Workers Center for Racial Justice. We appreciate you for stepping out and delivering that yes vote to bring a supermajority, both in the Senate and a supermajority in the House, to pass that legislation. And just so everybody knows, Clean Slate legislation is legislation that will create an automated process to bring record clearance to non-violent eligible offenders, people with arrest and conviction records. And this will open the door for jobs, for housing, for education, civic engagement, and more. And that was a monumental thing. And this has made Illinois the 13th state in the country to do this, including Washington, D.C. And this is no small feat. This is a monumental feat. Illinois will become the most expansive, this will be the most expansive ceiling legislation in the country. And thank you for your support. And I wanted to say that to you face to face.
Thank you so much. It was that was I can't believe I forgot to mention that. The Clean Slate Act was monumental for social justice, for equity, for restorative justice. You know, when we voted on that bill, it was also late at night. It was like 10 o'clock. We voted Clean Slate. I thought to myself about how many people I have seen throughout my life, but even as a state senator, who want to work. And I always believe that everybody wants to work, and people have a hard time finding work. And there's these systemic barriers to work that exist, such as not being able to get expungement and not being able to get a second chance. And I always will believe that human beings can recover and can be redeemed. And I think that was just such an important step forward for Illinois. So thank you for what you said, and thank you for your advocacy, which was part of making sure that I and our colleagues did the right thing and brought this bill up for a vote. Because it took some years to get that done.
I had two questions about two different subjects. One, you mentioned the state troopers behavior. So I was wondering if you got, and I know you mentioned like the federal government has like supremacy clause, but the state troopers, CPD, I was wondering if you had any communications from either, Governor Pritzker or anyone like about what their directives to the state troopers or CPD are with regards to how they're interacting with ICE. And two is not an ICE question, a transit question. With the suspension of federal funding for a lot of transit projects and in conjunction with passing this bill, I was wondering what the status of the red line extension was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, let me be clear, there's been no communication, on this from the executive branch of the state government. I mean, I haven't heard, there haven't been briefings with the Illinois Senate that I'm a member of. So it's hard for me to comment on what the governor's plans are with this Illinois State Police when there's just been no communication with, at least not that I've been included in. I think that should change, and I hope that will change going into the spring session. What I am clear on is what I saw happening there, and the outrageous injustice, or the cognitive dissonance between we're here to protect free speech and seeing people getting kicked and batoned and pushed around like animals. I can't accept that. And so, I've reached out and asked for some communication on this. I'm hopeful that there will be communication soon on what the plan actually is for state troopers at Broadview, but at this time, I don't see any legitimate reason for them to be there because I don't believe that free speech has been protected, and there certainly has been bodily harm done. And so that's entirely untenable. What was the second part of your question?
The red line extension.
Oh yeah, red line extension. Back to transit. So yes, unfortunately, we read a story about a month ago that the Trump administration was going to suspend funding for the extension of the red line on the far south side. So not in our district, but the opposite of the red line. Obviously, that's reprehensible. It's petty. It's bad public policy. Doesn't make sense. And I think it was a stunt that was just meant to sort of pick on Chicago. It's become a sport as of late of our friends in Washington. And what I would say is that I think that there's still going to be strong support here from all parties that have helped to make the case for modernization of transit to move forward on the red line extension. I think it's a basic question of racial equity. It's a basic question of economic development. It's a basic question of what it means to really reinvest in American cities, not just in the sense of gentrification, but actually like making it possible for people in all communities to have amenities like transit and what I like to call public goods, housing, and access to green space, and access to food, grocery stores, and things that like we should all have in all communities of Chicago. So I think that us in Illinois, I'm on the Senate Transportation Committee, so I've spoken up about this. I don't think this is going to be a passive fight because we've been working for years towards having a red line extension, I think it's just a matter of time before we're able to actually see that move forward. I would encourage you to also, raise this with our local city council members and with the mayor. A lot of this does, in terms of the red line extension, sits with City Hall, but I'm prepared to use my platform and identify state funding and whatever it takes to make sure that it happens, and not just be the punching bag of the Trump administration or their transportation department. Yes.
Yes, I had a couple of really quick observations. One was that for those of you that here that are interested in where some of that money shifting is going, as far as, why Homeland Security is suddenly so outsized funded, where it's coming from, where it's coming from FEMA, where it's coming from disaster relief, from, going after gun trafficking, whatever. There's an excellent New York Times article on Sunday that really does a lot of it, and like with any New York Times article, of course, you look at it critically, but it's a really kind of wealth of information. There's a long investigative article about that. The other observation I had was there is data gathering by our governor, and my question is, what pressure is being put on the state's attorney to actually use some of these for cases against harm to small businesses, against harm to individuals impacted by this operation? Are there going to be charges, or is there a blind eye turned in the state's attorney's office to things that actually could be litigated?
Yeah.
And the third thing is, with the impact of the English only executive order, what impact is it going to have on the next election cycle in terms of non-English voting materials, such as ballots and so forth?
Yeah, thank you for those comments. I want to try to address a few things. I'm not sure if the state's attorney's office, we haven't heard anything from them yet, but we can reach out to them and ask if they've thought about the litigation piece of this. I think it dovetails with the question that was asked earlier around basically countersuing the federal government. I think not to oversimplify it, but that was basically the question I was asked earlier, and I think this is similar, right? The sense that there's been grave injustice done to the people of Chicagoland. We are a sovereign, free society, and there ought to be consequences for that, and not just they left and everything's back to normal. Because it's not. It's not back to normal. A lot of people are afraid to frequent institutions that are the hallmark of our lives, like schools and churches and grocery stores and business stores. And so I support having some kind of reckoning on this that the courts, I think, will play a large role in. But we would have to do some homework with the Cook County State's Attorney to find out what's being conducted there at all levels of government. Cook County Board of President, Cook County Board of Commissioners, City Hall, and of course our state government and the Attorney General's office. I think there ought to be a whole coalition of stakeholders that come together on this in the spring, and I think that's what has to happen. And this is part of what we've got to spend the first few months of the year looking at, is what are we going to do to ensure that this doesn't happen again, or how do we take the right steps so that people think twice, but they just invade different cities and regions across the country and just blatantly disregard the Constitution and existing laws. And we can't. That's not a tenable situation. And so we need to adapt quickly. And then you asked the third question, and I'm trying to remember.
English only voting materials.
Okay. You're asking if those exist, or?
No, I'm saying that with the executive order that English is officially the language of America, is that going to material impact actually the next election?
Yeah.
In terms of voting materials.
We'll make sure that it doesn't. That's a really foolish executive order. I mean, it just, right, I think we understand one that that's yet another stunt. I think it's going to be really important for our legal advocacy organizations that fight to protect the access to the ballot to come up with a game plan on this to make sure that that doesn't happen, because I'm worried about that happening in more remote parts of the country where you have a lot of immigrant communities, but you don't have Chicago's really organized, and we have a vast array of legal advocacy organizations that are there to protect people's fundamental human rights, including those whose English is not their first language. My dad came in as an asylum seeker from Ethiopia. Both of his parents spoke different languages. We have to. America is not just an English-speaking country. I can't believe I have to say that, but let's just say it for the record. And so, no, we're not interested in that executive order, and we want all of our communities to be able to vote. Even if I'll just take a minute to mention that I have a bill that I'm fighting for right now in the state senate that would allocate $5 million to translate all state government services and programs into 24 languages. Spanish, Mandarin, Urdu, and those languages, but also languages of Africa. There's so many African immigrants in our communities, and they must be included in this. For too long, Black African immigrants have been an afterthought when it comes to this question. So as the son of an Ethiopian, I'm the first one to raise that in our state services. And I'm proud that that bill is building up a lot of support, because the sense is that the time has come for people who need access to SNAP and might need an emergency rental assistance to, if they don't speak English, to be able to access those programs, because they pay taxes, and that's what some of those programs are there for. Yes, way to that.
Since you mentioned SNAP,
I hear there are cuts coming, and one of the cuts is, one of the things I noticed is that specifically refugees are not mentioned at all. And some states are making a more conservative approach there and not offering benefits to refugees, and I'm very concerned about that, as if they're not prepared, or I don't know how we're going to fill that gap.
Yeah, I have not heard of any formal proposals that would not allow refugees to access SNAP. If we hear of anything like that, we're going to fight back on it. We're going to push back on it. Because it's ridiculous. It's like the executive order. I mean, they're throwing things at the wall and just saying with sticks. I mean, that's the operating principle of the Trump administration. And I think we all know that our community is where we are right now. Uptown is the Ellis Island for immigrant and refugees from all over the world, including my dad, when he came to this community just shortly before I was born, and people who continue to come here now. And so food to me is a human right. It's not a question of who deserves to eat, who deserves housing. These austerity arguments have to go down the trash can. Everybody deserves to eat, everybody deserves housing, everybody deserves health care, and I'm willing to fight for it. And I know I have a lot of colleagues that feel the same way. So I'm not worried about that, but we're very vigilant, and we'll make sure that in the administration of our SNAP programs in Illinois, that we will always make sure that they are available to those who are eligible and who are under the 200% federal poverty level. If anything, we should be expanding SNAP eligibility and not contracting. Yes.
Thank you, Senator. I was about to ask about the same topic that she mentioned actually. So I believe under the changes of HR 1, which is the One Big Beautiful Bill Act of 2025, specifically under the section 10.10.8 of HR 1, many lawful immigrant, refugees, survivors of human trafficking, domestic violence victims, and others that they are still not green card holders, they will be prevented from having SNAP. So I believe the state make a waiver of 120 days, and I believe that will end on January 31st, 2026. So it's actually stressing every non-green card holders, because they will be prevented based on this federal law. So is there any plan at the statewide, because I know it's difficult to waive that beyond the 120 days, either there will be local programs, statewide programs. So I really appreciate another highlight. Thank you.
Yes. So I heard most of your question. Can you just recap the last part of the question? I want to make sure I heard the whole.
Yeah, the question now, there is a waiver for 120 days. Some state just extend the 120 days because that's end under, like by November 1st. I believe in Illinois still the SNAP will be eligible until January 31st, 2026. So is there any plan beyond that? Because that's what's concerned us actually, because millions of people will be prevented from SNAP soon.
So you're talking about the SNAP program and eligibility cutting off after 120 days from
non-green card holders.
Oh, yes. So we have not heard the details on how that's going to work, but we'll look into it. And if we can get your contact info, we can get back to you in the next day or two with an update. Yes.
Going back to what ICE is doing around the country, they're using facial recognition software, and that's not only intimidating, but it's probably illegal and unconstitutional. When you were thinking of submitting to legislation new things, did that come up?
Some of the acoustics are kind of difficult. Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Sorry. ICE is using facial recognition software, which is probably unconstitutional, illegal.
Yes, absolutely.
When you submitted new legislation, was that considered?
So the ICE legislation that I am working towards considers a lot of things that we saw over the 6 or 8 weeks that they were here. In terms of facial recognition software, I have not looked specifically at that, but we certainly will. I don't, just to be clear, I don't think that any government agency should be, facial software, technology starts to get into a really dark place in terms of that data can be bought and sold, can be made for profit, and there's 5 or 6 spaces down the pipe in terms of where the accountability is going to be on that data. So I just, as a matter of principle, don't support facial software recognition technology, and I think that I want to look at how whatever ICE is talking about doing with that technology. I don't know the latest, but we should be on guard for that. The other part of this too is that a lot of those rules are going to be much more impactful at the federal level. But I think we should still look at this at the state level, and if there are any laws that we can put in place, even if they're patchwork just for Illinois, I'm prepared to champion and fight for them and steer them to passage. So we're going to certainly look into that as well. Yeah, I would love it too if I could get your contact info so we can kind of keep in touch with you about it. Connor, our outreach director or operations director, will make sure to get that. Yes.
I have a topic back to transit. I know there's a lot of funding going into it, and there's, it sounds like there's going to be a lot more availability for transit. Is there anything in there around transit safety, especially on subways?
Yeah, around personal safety?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So two things come to mind. In the transit bill, we were able to secure language and funding for what's going to be known as a Transit Ambassador Program. And that's meant to be a safety initiative because it'll hire people who are trained to be nice and professionalize the services and make people feel a little bit less under siege when you're on transit. How many of you here use public transit? Show of hands. That's like everybody. I love uptown. And so, you know, we're on the buses and trains. Everybody's a little on edge. Everybody feels rushed. Everybody feels unsafe and on guard. And it doesn't have to be like that. And I think just having people riding trains who are there to help problem solve. Right? Someone gets lost. They don't know which train to transfer to. There's a nice person that can help you with that. If you're having a conflict with somebody, there's somebody there that can help you with that. There's always an extra set of eyes on the train, which is studies show that that's how we have safer vehicles for transit. So I feel good about the Transit Ambassador. It was a personal initiative I really fought for to get into the transit bill, and it's based on best practices. There's more we can do. I mean, I also pushed really hard to get the CTA to commit to power washing its vehicles after each terminus on buses and train lines. We were able to get funding to actually actualize that. So we're going to be we're going to be implementing hard with them to make sure that these initiatives get put into place. And there's always more that can be done. There is. And so, you know, I'll just say in the spirit of transparency that I get really nervous about police being on trains because I think we ask the police to do too much. You know, I don't think that they should have to handle mental health crises, keep us safe, bring justice to victims of homicide and all the things that we put on the police. I want people who are trained to take part in the safety apparatus that I think really gets us to community wellness, which is the theme of our town hall tonight, is wellness. And I think we can get there with our transit. And I'm not just saying this, I really believe people in public transit. I think about it a lot as part of my legislative work, and it's because of the community that I serve. And so I want to think about how we can make it safer, how we can make it faster, how we can make it cleaner, and make it an option that people want to use. People feel like they're missing out if they don't take public transit. It's cool to take public transit. Were there ideas that you had on that you wanted to share? Because I'm always thinking about this.
Yeah, I guess one of my concerns is that especially with trains, there's only one staff person. So like I saw somebody get beat up once. I stopped the conductor and he's like, oh, well, is it over with? I got a route to go, you know, and he just said, oh, that's not the right answer. Well, I got it. He's one guy for like 10 cars, but I also know like in Europe often they don't use turnstiles, but they check tickets. And then if somebody's too drunk on the train, they ask them to get off.
Yeah.
So moving the person that sits by the turnstiles onto more of the train could be another eye I've seen too.
There's a lot to that, and I think that we should be really mindful when the CEOs of these agencies are put in place. So right now, Nora Leeson is the interim CEO of CTA. She's great. I think that she really is a true believer on transit and wants to do the right thing. But we got to make sure that when people are installed to be on the boards of these agencies, that they're thinking about these kind of questions. Because I think it's not. I don't think it's a safe situation to have one transit operator or one official on eight train vehicles going down trains.
Yeah, I want to take the bus because it's like per car.
And that also is a safety issue for the bus operator. In fact, a lot of the bus operators during the transit legislation, when we were trying to do the negotiations, kept telling us that they don't feel safe. That people attack them, people are verbally abusive to them. We've seen that, I think, at times, and that's an outrage. And so I think part of it is having a little bit more of a presence on our buses and trains. It's not just the bus operators, the only official person, but the transit ambassadors that can help, again, to kind of bring a cultural calm to our public transit so that people feel a little bit more at ease. I think that's half the battle. I mean, there are other transit systems around the world that are safer and feel safer. And I think that there's so much data and there's so many studies that we have that back this up. And so what I've tried to do as your state senator is to lift up what works in places like Berlin and Bogota, Colombia. Even in New York City has a really good bus rapid transit system that it's not like silver standard bus rapid transit, but it's great in terms of it's fast and it's easy to access and it doesn't stop every block. We could be doing that here, and so it takes people that are going to champion that and see it through. I don't have to think to. Yeah. Yes.
Trying to think how to frame this question, different topic. about tariffs and how they're impacting all of us, both as consumers and a small business owner in communities. So not only with ICE and seeing less people coming out because people are afraid to know my business, but other businesses, but also the cost of everything to do business and to shop. I'm just wondering if there's anything being discussed at the state level for relief for businesses and for people from this, and it has come, from the federal government with, they would buy spaghetti soon
Yeah.
because that's going to have, a huge tariff on it. So just curious about that.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So the Trump administration tariffs are an outrage, they're bad economic policy, and no one is winning in those scenarios. And so the impact of the tariffs have been that products have become more expensive, inventories have become more expensive for our small businesses and our retailers, which means that we all are paying more for food, we're paying more for equipment, we're paying more for inventory as small business owners, and that's really bad for our economy, it's bad for people's livelihoods. No one wins in this scenario. And so, yes, in fact, one of the bills that I'm introducing for the spring session would create a grant program for small businesses that are on small business corridors that were hit hard by the ICE raids. And the thinking behind that is those are going to be a lot of the same corridors that are probably affected by tariffs because all of them are, when we think about it. But then they got the double whammy of the chilling effect of the ICE raids, and a lot of them are struggling to recover right now. I think that we ought to create something similar to the Small Business Restoration Grant, which we created in 2023 for the 7th District, where we were able to get $2.5 million to give 225 $10,000 grants to small businesses right here in Uptown Edgewater, Rogers Park, $10,000, no small, easy to access question, helping our small businesses all across the district. That's the type of forward thinking and imagination that should be happening statewide when it comes to our small business corridors, our main streets, and I'm championing that. And I think that we can create a program like that in the next budget cycle. We're going to have to fight for it. It's hard to fund a lot of these new programs, but these are the programs that will be responsive to what is happening right now. And the tariffs, I think we're only barely seeing what the effect of the tariffs are going to be to our local economies and small business corridors. But I want us to have Clark Street and Broadway and Morris and Rogers Park, and of course Irving Park and further south of here. We have retail corridors of the envy of the world, and it's because a lot of them are able to operate and are able to do so in a way that is sustainable. And so government has to be responsive to that. During the veto session, there was a point where we were being asked to vote on a package that would basically create a Hollywood tax credit for big film companies. And I got a little upset about that because I said, I don't think this has, I support that, but I don't think this is maybe the moment in terms of what small businesses are really dealing with in our district and people who want to be able to create jobs for the community. And so can we please reprioritize where we're spending our time and our attention? And I think that was effective for the veto session. Another thing that was also helpful is we voted on legislation in the veto session that decouples the state of Illinois from Trump's recent tax policies. So that's part of the offensive, but I think we need a more direct, programmatic response to what's happening here. And I've got a lot of ideas, and I'm excited to roll out a few bills in January that I think will get in the direction. But we need more people in state government to be thinking about this too, because I feel like I'm often the only one sometimes thinking about true mom-and-pop businesses and not just the big picture economic data.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Of course.
What do you mean by decoupling from the federal tax? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so in the federal budget bill that passed in July, there were a number of tax provisions that were put in place. One of them that was the impetus for the bill was legislation that would make it easier for wealthy companies to basically write off investments. That's now national policy. Illinois was able to decouple itself from that policy. And there were some other more obscure tax provisions that we were able to find with the economic and finance and budgetary staff in the state of Illinois to basically say Illinois is not going to let the federal public policy of these tax provisions affect our state. We can do that in some scenarios. Yes.
If we're passing all this legislation and changing certain things that have been reversed, that have been put in place by the Trump administration,
he's not following the law. He's not working with Congress at all. In the beginning of January, we were told, oh, don't worry about your Social Security or anything being disconnected because by the time it goes through Congress and all that, he'll be out of office before it gets affected. But he hasn't worked with Congress from day one. So when you're doing all these things, what does it mean? Because he's not, he's ignoring it. How is anything becoming law?
What was the first part of it? It's the acoustic.
How are we having any laws if he's not respecting any laws?
Oh, right.
Yeah,
That's the question. That should be the head of the town hall. When we have a lawless president, what does the law even mean?
Yeah.
That's basically what you're asking.
Yeah.
And I think all of us here and people around the country are maddened and outraged by just the blatant disregard for the law, blatant disregard for the Constitution, basic disregard for basic respect for humanity and human rights. And for civil laws.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. Like all these things with ICE, they're doing that.
Yeah.
I haven't seen anybody being punished for it.
Yeah, and that's what one of your counterparts asked earlier is what does the counter offensive look like? I mean, we're just getting started. The bill that we passed in the bill to counter ICE, that was a monumental step forward, but it's not enough. It's not going to be enough because I would like to go further and create legislation that would keep ICE away from schools entirely. You know, I don't see any scenario where we want ICE anywhere near our schools. I think that we ought to be keeping them away from third spaces, and away from community centers and other places that are meant to be community points for our communities. And then, of course, there's the basic question of justice, right? What's the state's attorney and the attorney general and the Corporation Counsel for Illinois thinking in terms of what the legal response is? What's the legal counteroffensive? And I think we're just starting to hear what that's going to look like. And so I look forward to the spring session to keeping folks keeping the fire on this and saying, Operation Midway Blitz was not a one-time data point in history. This is a legacy that was left here now that affect not just immigrant communities, but all of us, because even people who were U.S. who were citizens of the United States were abducted.
And they're arresting them with fake ICE people, or fake people that are pretending to be ICE.
Yeah, I have heard reports of that.
I've seen them. I've never taken photographs. I'm scared to do anything. I've seen them.
So we got to keep the pressure on, guys. I mean, we are going to have to bring on all of our elected officials, including those that are, the state, the folks that are top lawyer for the state of Chicago, top lawyer for Cook County, top lawyer for the state of Illinois, to say what is the counteroffensive? How are we basically incentivizing or putting a chilling effect on this happening again? I don't want to accept that ICE is going to come back here. I'm like, what are we doing right now to make that as least of an attractive option for them as possible? I think the legislation I'm filing is intent and is fervent in its intent to keep them out of here or at least protect our rights as a sovereign state. But there's more that we should do. There should be consequences for these things. And that's not even to mention the budgetary scenario of the $170 billion that was taken from human services programs and Medicaid to fund basically what jobs agencies for bullies. That's what this was, a job recruitment program for bullies who came in here and beat people up and threw people to the ground and do all this stuff that was totally unnecessary for the enforcement of immigration laws. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done to truly have a reckoning on Operation Blitz. And I want to hear more of my colleagues in the state legislature talking about that. I want to hear more of our members of Congress saying those words and acting on it. And don't just show up when there's raid. Don't just show up when there's a photo opportunity, but really get deep in the weeds with the budget staff and with the legal staff to see I want to do everything we can to bring justice to those who were harmed by Operation Midway Blitz and to make sure it never happens again. That could be a full-time focus and job for the next 2 months. And that's a lot of what I think about. It's my top legislative priority going into the spring session. We need some backup from our counterparts at all levels of government, including the federal government. Our U.S. senators. We need their help right now. We need their passion on these issues. And we need them to throw their weight around. I would feel safer if I saw that. I want to see them throwing their weight around. I want to see them holding the Trump administration accountable in those things, not just at press conferences. Yeah. Okay, I think we have a couple more questions. I want to make sure we get to everybody who. Okay, we'll take. The young lady in the back, and then we'll come up here. Yeah. Give me your outside voice if you don't mind.
So I actually have two questions. I am actually a teacher. Actually here, there's a high school inside the city colleges. It's called Truman Middle College. It's the oldest, it's the second oldest middle college in the United States. The majority of, a large population of my students are immigrant students. And actually when we had the influx of migrants that came in, our gym was used as a shelter. And a lot of those students were able to get a high school education if they were able to take ESL classes upstairs. So a lot of our students are afraid to come to school. Either they're afraid or their parents are like, we are not letting them come because ICE is around the corner. I've literally had students email me and say, I can't come into school for the next couple of days because ICE has been patrolling and their parents won't let them come to school because either they or their parents are afraid that they will not come home. And so that's one thing. Also with the population of my students, we have a lot of students that are homeless. And so, and also a lot of them rely on SNAP benefits. And our teachers have just been asking, like, with everything going on with ICE and government shutdown of SNAP benefits, and we have fall break coming up next week, and a lot of students are like, we don't know if we're going to get food. And so, one, for the idea of the safety of protection, like, it's special for the city college. And I know they have their own thing, like, what is that general policy? That's one thing, like, how are, like, of course, state government, how are they protecting the students, but also, like, city college students that come in, because there's also a large migrant population. That's one question, sorry. The second question, like I said, I do teach, and it is required that teachers do professional development for things relating to their fields, but also things that are helping with, like, social emotional needs of students, or like ESL's language learning, cultural acquisition for students. And a lot of those programs are either offered from well-known, well-respected institutions out of state, but also colleges and universities and government entities. And within the last couple of years, it is only now that teachers can earn PD credits from in-state institutions, which to me does not make sense. If I were to learn about World War II, and I am a master teacher with the National World War II Project in New Orleans, if that is the mainstay to go for that information, why as a teacher can I not go and earn PD credits there? Because that has been changed in the last couple of years. I've actually emailed the Illinois State Board of Education. I've emailed State Senator, I want to say it's Kelly. She lives in my district, like in the district. Because if I wanted to work, actually, sorry, I'm currently working with the Smithsonian Institution, and they're offering me professional development, but because they are an institution that is not in-state, I technically cannot register those credits, which, because like, I work with institutions like Harvard, Fielder Learning. These are well-known national institutions, and for some reason, the state of Illinois has no longer accepted those PD credits, which is frustrating, because they offer amazing things, but it also kind of, it kind of dissuades teachers to look at other sources that they can get information from, which possibly they could not find in the state of Illinois. So it just does not make sense to me why they changed this, if that makes sense at all.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Shout out to the Smithsonian. Thank you for a lot of work and preserve our cultural troves, especially at the time when Black history is being erased by the Smithsonian. I want to look into the accreditation scenario that you mentioned. I don't know the rules and the promulgation of rules and regulations at the agency that pertain to that scenario, but we'll look into it. Congress, if I could ask you to just grab her information and let's get back to you. I'll get back to you only next week with what we find out. So we'll do a little bit of homework on that. Unless the staff knows the answer on this, we'll have to do some digging, but we'll get into it. Is that good? Does that work for you? Okay, we'll take one final question and then you and I can talk one-on-one after. So anyone else wants to talk one-on-one, I'm gonna hang out here, so, but I want to respect everybody's time, so go ahead.
My question is in regards to housing. What is the city doing to add more affordable housing? I know there were talks of turning like commercial properties into like residential properties, and there's like zoning and things like that required, but not adding or building luxury condos. But you know what's going on there.
Yeah. So I can tell you that in the transit bill, there's so much good news from the Veto session. I completely forgot to mention that my own bill that I worked on, the People Over Parking Act, got included in the transit legislation. So it is now, when the governor signs the transit bill, we will now have removed parking requirements for new residential construction that is near a transit a hub or a transit corridor, a block transit corridor or a quarter mile of a transit hub. That's a big deal because it's going to bring down the cost of housing construction, which means we will see more housing being built, not just in Chicago, because that, my People Over Parking legislation will impact Chicago and be bigger and supplant the existing laws on this, but it also be statewide. So you've got suburban areas and townships that will become, it'll mitigate sprawl, it will create a scenario where people can live, maybe folks can't afford to live in West Loop, but they'll live in Oak Park, or they'll live in St. Charles or Elgin as opposed to living on the northwest side of Chicago, or vice versa, and that's good. We should be creating more new and affordable housing everywhere, and People Over Parking is a dramatic step forward. We're the only fourth state when that is signed into law that will have People Over Parking laws. So I'm glad we got that done. Shout out to transit advocates who worked with me to get that over the finish line. It was a big step forward. Now on the question of affordable housing in Chicago, I'm not as able to comment on that as the city council member and the mayors have more direct purview of that, but what I can tell you, just what I know, is that the affordable requirements ordinance is the beast in the room. It's a great tool that says whenever developers build housing and the city gives them free land or tax incentives or air rights, they have to build 20% of the units have to be affordable. And that, it used to be 10%, and I was at City Hall, I actually fought to move it up to 25%. 20% is great. What happens though when the developer's not asking the city for anything? Doesn't need a public subsidy, doesn't need TIF, doesn't need air rights. They build as a right, and a lot of times they just kind of do what they want. And so I think it's really important for our neighbors to do what, I think folks do a really good job in Uptown Israel and Rogers Park of weighing in on these development processes and participating in the development process that others are convening to weigh in on those processes. But there are too many times where developments come out of those processes and they don't give us affordable housing, or the amount of affordable housing is a joke compared to the size of the unit. And it's a 50-unit building and 3 units are affordable. That's insults our intelligence, and it does not address the affordable housing crisis. So I love our argument, but we gotta be hard and really demand affordable housing at every opportunity. Some of them are better than others on this, but I myself have taken the unprecedented step as a state senator of leaning on my own argument that I overlap with and saying this is important to me because I grew up in public housing in Lincoln Square. Right? I'm not just popping off about it. I understand the value of affordable housing in the North Lakefront, and if we're not intentional about it, we could lose it. And in 20 years, our neighborhood can be entirely out of reach for so many. And so I'm happy about People Over Parking. I'm happy that we have some leadership at City Hall on this to protect the affordable requirements ordinance. Great social housing is going to be a new initiative in Chicago, which is a big deal. I think our country ought to get back to building great housing and building social housing and building public housing. I think we need more elected officials who will say that and then throw their weight around to make it happen. And I'm down to do that. That's a lot of what we're doing with this office, and passing policy at the state level that also helps complement the construction of affordable housing. And finally, we need a commitment from our federal partners on this. It's been a generation since there's been a real debate in Congress around affordable housing. It's an afterthought issue. I don't hear members of Congress talking about really investing in cities. And for the last generation, I'm a millennial, I feel like I grew up with the suburbs being prioritized for these kind of things. And the cities are having their day. We're coming back. And so But we gotta do this right, because if we're not, the city's gonna become unaffordable for pretty much all of us.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. I'm gonna hang out here, so if any of you want to come chat with me, or don't like asking questions in public, I'll be here, so just come find me. Thanks.
Thank you.